Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending on where you're located. Kim has not reached out, and I'm not sure what's happening there. So I think we're going to cancel today's show. I thought I'd just go live and just see, just in case anyone is around, or if potentially she showed up. I'm sure something happened. She's pretty excited. Yes, just as of yesterday. So, yeah. I don't necessarily want to sit here and ramble about nothing, but if you are listening, or if there's anyone live, there's a few viewers. It says, shoot me a message because might as well bring some folks on. I'm already here. I'm already live. It's already set up. Otherwise, we'll just see where this goes. We had some crazy weather in Texas last night. Honestly, like we rarely get rain in the summertime, and on top of rarely getting rain, we are actually getting like flooding. So there's a bridge on the road to get to my house, and I can't even cross that bridge. We keep losing power, which means we lose internet and all the things. So it has been fun. And honestly, I thought I would have to cancel due to power issues. So we'll just kind of see. I'm just going to give it a few more minutes here and see if maybe something happened. See if Kim's able to join us. Got a few more viewers. If anyone's interested in joining the show, Kim has not reached out. And so I'd be happy to just bring anybody on and just chat. Maybe we want to bring a few folks on. So I'm just going to linger and ramble. Pretty good at that, actually. And see if there's any interest. So throw a message in the chat. I can reach out via DM and give you the invite link to come and join. There's a pug snoring next to me. She's pretty cute. She's not pretty cute. She's super cute. Kim!
Was I supposed to show up like 15 minutes ago? I am so...
Yes, but it's live, just so you know.
I'm so sorry.
Welcome. I'm glad you're here. No, you're totally fine. I was just like, I was hoping that something didn't happen because I'm like, oh, I know we had just recently chatted. So I am so glad you're here. It is already live, so just so you know.
Sure. No problem.
It's okay. I've been rambling about Texas weather.
We don't have
to. Yeah, absolutely. Exactly. For sure. How are you? How's your morning?
Good. I've been good. My son just got done with school and he has his last baseball game tonight. So kind of looking forward to running around for that stuff being over. But yeah, otherwise it's been good. How about you?
Yeah, good. That kind of stuff is like really surreal, right? Because you're like, oh, thank heavens it's over. I don't have to keep running around because it can be a lot, right? But then at the same time, you're like, oh, another year bites the dust. They're just going to get bigger and grow and continue to just step away, you know?
Yeah.
So,
my son is 11 and he's about as tall as I am now. And it's kind of eerie. I don't really know how to describe it, but it's weird to have like an 11-year-old be the same height as you. I'm short though, but
I know
still.
that all too well. I'm not short. I'm 5'8". Maybe I'm like 5'7" and 3/4. You know, you got to like round up a little bit. And I don't remember what age it was that my now 16-year-old surpassed me. I'm trying to think, but I want to say it was somewhere around that. And unfortunately, some like mom insights. I'm not sure if he's your oldest, but as soon as they turn 12, they turn into little stinkers for a couple years. So enjoy every second you have until that point.
Limited time until 12. So yeah, I guess that's kind of more official teenagerdom, right?
Yeah, it's like they go through the like puberty stage and they get all like weirdly emotional, but like they don't know what to do with the emotion. So then they're just like, and they like speak in grunts. At least that's been the trend for both my 16 and my 14-year-old. They are on the other side and they have come back to their mother and they now love me again.
Getting to the other side at
12 and 13 is hard. Yes. Yeah. It's only a couple years, but man, it's a painful couple years.
Yeah, I'm not looking forward to it. I know I was a difficult teenager to my parents. I actually wrote them like this big elaborate apology letter when I was 18 and I was like leaving for college and it made both of them cry. But I'm glad
Oh.
we, were able to get through all of that because I mean, I know people who don't to this day are my age and don't talk to their parents. So may that not be me.
That's kind of more yeah, no kidding. I mean, that was, like, the consensus for me, like, I was difficult with my parents, but they were difficult to live with, so I think it was, like, a dual force, but we kinda had, like, a nice little, like you just kind of vent it out, right? Like, I think I was, like, 22 or 23, I was, like, right before I was getting married, and I got married when I was oh, no, you know what? I bet I was, like, 21 because I got married when I was 21, I was young. And I kind of vented it all out, and then later, actually just, like, 3 months ago, my dad's like, "Just so you know, you really hurt me when
Oh,
you
like
said
three
those
months
things." And
ago.
I was like, "Well, you really hurt me when you did
Oh, man.
those things." So but it was nice because we got to, like, sort of, bond over that. I'm like, "Oh, it only took me till I'm almost 40 to, fix things with my
Yeah.
dad."
But at
So,
least they're
yeah, it's
fixed. Like
all fun.
that's the important
Yeah.
thing. All our
Exactly,
parents are
exactly.
just doing
Okay,
their
well,
best.
on to you. Yeah. Honestly, like, that's actually the consensus of the conversation, and it was actually really nice because then I turned and had that conversation with my kids, and I was like, "Guys, just so you know, I'm literally just trying to do the best that I can do. So, like, if there are things that really upset you, like, let's just talk about it. Like, have the conversation, make this open space." And, I think that's actually helped a lot too,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
teenagers. All right. Well, let's talk about you. I would love for you to like introduce yourself, and like that can include as much or as little as you want. Obviously, you're a mom, which to me that's like my most important title. But I'd love to hear, like what you're up to now, maybe what you've done in the past, how you kind of got here, whatever you want to do to sort of introduce yourself.
Yeah,
And
sure.
yeah, leave it at that.
So my name is Kim Maida. I'm currently the Senior Director of Developer Relations at a startup called Fusion Auth. And I actually went to college for animal behavior neurobiology. So I have a degree in that. I
Ooh.
was working in doing field research mostly, and
Mm.
I had at the time thought that I didn't want to go back to school to get my PhD because it would take a long time, and I wouldn't just be able to do research the whole time. I would also have to teach. And at that time,
Mm.
that sounded like something I didn't want to do. Now, ironically, it turns out I love teaching, so I probably would have loved that too. And I'd be somewhere very, very
Mm.
different now. But instead of doing the teaching thing and the doctorate, I went back to school for dietetics. So I was going into human bio as like a second degree on
Mm.
top of that one. Um, and while
Ooh, look at you.
while I was doing that, though, I got a part-time job to support myself through sort of like my additional degree, doing web development and
Sure.
design for the university. And I've
Mm.
been doing that as a hobby and kind of a little bit of like smallish freelance for many years. I learned HTML, I think, when I was in like 10 or 11 at like a summer science camp. And
Very
I've
cool.
basically been just making GeoCities sites and things like that. And then, moved up to WordPress and started to actually learn how to program and things like that. But for some reason, and I don't know why, all the way into college, all the way through my first degree, I never even considered that to be a possible career path. So I was like, I had been so set on science, like pretty much my whole life. I was like, I'm
Mhm.
going to be a scientist. And so that was just a hobby. It was just like a way to make a little bit of money on the side and have some fun. And it wasn't until I actually
Yeah.
did get a part-time job doing it that I was like, oh, this is totally a viable career path. So I actually changed my major because I still wanted to. I didn't need any more education in like web dev, and I didn't really get any more
Mm, mhm.
out of my second degree that I didn't already kind of have. But
Yep.
I wanted to finish out the degree so that I wouldn't, like, be dropping out of the second one. And then also, I had to be a student to keep that particular job. So I
Oh, sure. That makes
finished
sense.
out I worked at that job for a little while longer, and before I finished the degree, I went to work for a digital agency. And they kind of let me out
Mm.
early on some days to finish classes. But I did that for a
That's
little
nice.
while and then got hired back at the university full time to do web design and
Mm.
development, like front end development and design too. So I had a lot of fun doing that. The 403B was really nice. So university would give you a really good retirement. But at the time I didn't think anything of it. I was like, 20.
Mhm.
So it wasn't high on my list. Now I think back and I think about how wonderful that was. But yeah, so I did that for a little while and then ultimately kind of wanted to start making more money and just try more things, be able to do more things beyond what the university was doing, right? Because there's kind of the idea that universities, the technology moves kind of slowly sometimes. And I was doing websites for ag and natural resources, which are
Very cool.
their focus is not technology. Like the people I'm making the website for, their
Nope.
focus is definitely not technology. So like their needs were pretty basic. And
Yep.
so I didn't get to do a whole lot of like application development, and that's what I wanted to do. So I went
Mm.
to another digital agency. We moved from from Lansing, East Lansing, back closer to Ann
Mm.
Arbor, and I got a job at a boutique digital agency in Ann Arbor. And I was there for a little over 4 years. Had kind of came in knowing how to maybe like open and close a modal with JavaScript. Like that was like the extent of like my JavaScript knowledge. In the course of that, I became a
Mhm.
full stack JavaScript engineer. And then I went on to become the engineering lead for that group. So
Amazing.
at what happened like at the end of that though was I was really happy there, but some of the client work was really intense, and we had a client at the
Mm.
time, and I was pulling like really long hours, and kind of during the course of
Mm.
that I got pregnant, and then I had the baby, and then I took the 3 months, and then I came back to work, and before I even opened the door to the office building, like another coworker was like standing on the other side and they were like, just wait till you see this. And I was like, uh-oh. So I walked into like 100-hour work weeks, and I was like missing milestones for
With a
my kid. Yeah.
baby?
And I
Oh.
survived that until launch, until like the production launch. And I was like, I cannot do this anymore. Um, I'm
Yeah.
missing my child's, you
Oh.
know, there's so many milestones young age,
Everything.
and I missed a bunch of them, and it was just so depressing. So yeah,
Oh.
I then got my first remote job, and I went to work for Auth0, doing
Ooh,
content.
nice.
So it was technical content. Basically, my whole job at that time was to write for the blog. Um, Auth0's
Mhm.
blog had a very strong reputation, basically in the development community, because we
Mhm.
had like an entire team, like 8 people who all they did was write technical tutorials and articles for the blog, and we were all
Mm.
engineers who knew how to write. So it was very in-depth,
Yep.
very technical. We'd build all of these sample apps. We could even build like little real world apps and just teach people like advanced techniques and things. And then the authentication part was like at the time that I was there, it wasn't like super central to, it didn't have to be in like every single article. So we would teach people how
Mm.
to do some, you know, hot new thing with some hot new framework, and maybe have like a little aside
Yeah.
about auth at the end. So
Super smart, though.
it was and it wasn't. So it was interesting because I started going to conferences, and when I would say I worked at Auth0, people would say, "Oh, I love the blog." Like they didn't really know anything about the product, but they
Mm.
knew about the blog. And I think like
Interesting.
that was kind of the point where when I went into kind of a leadership role for that team, I wanted us to start talking more about authentication and authorization and
Yeah.
the things that our product was actually focused on. So we tried to do that in mostly like an agnostic way for like the concepts like OAuth and OIDC and that type of thing. Um, but then we did start to get into more in-depth product tutorials, which was really good for them, I think. But in the course of doing that, I had like a serendipitous opportunity to speak at a conference. And it was because somebody else had committed to an event, but the event was going to take place after they had left the company, so they were like leaving, and the event was after they were gone. So they asked me if I wanted to co-speak, and so I did. At the time, I was like, that sounds terrifying. I've always been terrified of public speaking, like my whole life. It sounds just mortifying. But I knew it was something I should do. So I went ahead and I did that. And the revelation was that I love public speaking, as it turns out. So the teaching, the public speaking, all these things, I was like, no, I'm going to hate that. It actually turned out to be things I really enjoy. So that caused me to start just applying to speak at more conferences. And I was doing that while leading like the technical content and the community teams under the DevRel umbrella there. And eventually I had just spent so much time in the DevRel space that I was moved over to lead the developer advocacy team. And so I did that for a little while. It was global dev advocacy. So I think now Auth0 has regional managers, but at that time it was one manager for all of the regions. And so that was another lots of long hours again, basically because of time zones.
Yep.
So we had people in Australia and Japan, and then people on the West Coast, and I'm in Eastern time. So there were a few like 12, 13-hour days there, just so that I could, be sure that I was there for all of my employees. But, I really enjoyed that. I wanted to progress my career, though, and there wasn't a real clear path upwards at Auth0 at the time. So I did end up leaving to get a higher level position at another startup, and I actually went through a few different startups after Auth0, mostly in DevRel leadership positions. And I worked with like some awesome people. It was really fun. I gained more experience, but the thing that I realized was I wasn't super passionate about any of the technologies or products that I was going through.
Been there.
And I was like, why is it that I can't get like deeply invested in any of these? Because they were all like in the development space, like they were all things that I could use and could become very familiar with. But it like there was something missing there for me. And so I told myself I got to get back into identity, because I guess that's like that's where I wanted to be, apparently.
Jam.
Like, who knew? But they kind of the interesting revelation, I think, that I realized when I did go back into identity is that I really enjoy doing DevRel for critical infrastructure. So things that everybody needs, but they don't necessarily feel super excited about. So I did work for some companies where people were massive communities, people super excited about the technology, and I thought I would love that. But for whatever reason, that just wasn't my thing. Like I was still doing off talks while I was working at these other companies, because that was what I was kind of known for then. But it was only until like very recently that I kind of solidified this reason for why identity was like so attractive to me. And I think it was because I really enjoy deep diving on a complex subject and then teaching it to people in a way where they can be successful without having to do a ton of deep diving themselves. And because everybody needs it, the audience is not like JavaScript developers. It's not like React developers. It's not backend developers. It's literally everybody. So the amount of surface area for different people you get to interact with in the communities, things like that, was really exciting to me too. And so, yeah, I basically have been in identity now again since then. So I joined Okta, and at Okta, I actually was DevRel adjacent. I wasn't in like the advocacy group, but I was in dev success, and I did developer content strategy was the team that I was leading. And that was exciting because it was an area that I didn't have a ton of experience with from a docs perspective. So it was mostly documentation. And I had quite a bit of dev content experience from like blogs and other types of content, but not specifically with documentation beyond just like helping out a DevX team with quick starts before. And so
Mhm.
I got to learn a ton about information architecture and about user testing. We did a bunch of like live user testing, and that was really, really eye-opening, honestly. There was an interesting revelation that came out of some of the testing that we did, which was when we gave people a tree test of like a possible menu for documentation. And we said,
Mhm.
where would you look to find instructions for how to log a user in? And like we were doing
Mm.
this at Octane, which is attended by identity and access management professionals. It's like 90% people in the
Mm.
industry. And like almost nobody knows
Mhm.
the heading authentication. I was like, that was mind-boggling to me.
Oh,
How
interesting.
how are people not picking authentication for where they would find login? But it it
Sure.
it was super eye-opening, right? Because maybe we shouldn't be calling that
Right.
heading authentication then. Like, if people are looking for login anywhere else except for there, then maybe that's just not the word that they're looking for.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was user research is one of those things that I since then I've gotten really interested in just because there's always surprises. Like, whatever you think people are going to do,
Mhm.
there's so many times where a majority of people do not do what you think they're going to do. And that was just really interesting to me because we were collecting, their information on like where do they work and what's their role, and these were like directors of IAM and stuff like that. So
Wow.
there was something there, and it was an interesting experience
Mhm.
to see that type of thing. But yeah, so I was at Okta for
Absolutely.
2 years. It was like big and corporate, and I missed startups. Startups move really fast, and they're small enough so that at sub
Mhm.
100 people, you can pretty much interact with all of the departments in the company in some way, which I think is crucial
Yep.
for DevRel. And so I couldn't really
I agree.
do that effectively at Okta just because of the size of the org and just priorities and the speed at which we moved and things like that. So
Mhm.
I went to FusionAuth, and now I am at FusionAuth, and I'm really enjoying it. I love it. One of the things that because I've worked at Auth0 and Okta, when I was interviewing, one of the things that I asked is like, "What's your differentiator?" Because there are so many like Auth startups now. Like, they're popping
Mhm.
up everywhere, and I think part of that is because Auth0 was bought by Okta for $6 billion. So they're all hoping to be the next $6
Mm, yep.
billion acquisition. Um, and when I asked, why are you different from like Auth0 or Front Egg or Clerk or Keycloak or any given thing that's out there. Um, and the
Mhm.
differentiators were that FusionAuth is downloadable, so you can run it on-prem, like,
Ooh,
for free. I mean, you have to pay for your own
huge
infrastructure,
differentiator.
but, like, on-prem
Yeah.
stuff, if you go to, like, a SaaS provider and you say you wanna run on-prem, you have to talk to sales, like, you will never even get a conversation about
Mhm.
just upfront pricing, like, that doesn't exist for on-prem stuff. And this was, like, on-prem
Yep.
out the door for free, which was crazy to me. And just the fact that they did that was really exciting to me. And then they have a cloud solution too, but it's dedicated cloud, so it's single tenant. So
Mm.
everybody in the cloud has their own dedicated resources, which is not true of all of these other
Mm.
multi-tenant cloud services. So if something
For sure.
happens to somebody else, it's not going to affect you because you're on your own resources. And that has been,
Yeah.
crucial, especially for people who need data isolation and also like for data sovereignty because we can spin stuff up in any region, or if they're
Mhm.
self-hosting, they can do that in any region, which has become more prevalent, since GDPR, and also we've been wondering what tariffs are gonna how tariffs might affect things like this in the future. So
Mhm.
those differentiators were pretty significant to me, and it made it an exciting opportunity for me to come and see where FusionAuth will go from here. So that's super long. That's super long, but that's how I got to where I am, um, with both the industry and with DevRel kind of transitioning through from science to development to DevRel.
Oh my gosh, that was so cool. I had like so many times where I just wanted to butt in and I'm like, okay, just let her talk. Just let her
Well,
talk.
now please do.
I love that. I mean, yeah, let's unpack a bunch of stuff. Um, First off, I love that. Like I had a similar sentiment. Like I went to school for criminal justice, then I went to school for business management, and I just like kept avoiding the idea of being a developer, even though it was everything that I love to do. I love to take computers apart. I love to mess with the hardware. I love to put it back together. I love to break software. I'd try to like hack into things. I really enjoyed like breaking through different barriers of like, oh, can I figure out how to get into software I shouldn't be in? And I had a lot of fun with that, but then never took that into a career. And so it's so interesting how I think sometimes we just kind of dive into things and don't realize it's like, oh, there's this nature. And I don't know about you, but like my dad, coming back to the whole talking about kids and things, like my dad was like, oh, you should do tech. You should do tech. And I was like, I'm not doing anything that you're going to tell me to do. So I'm not doing
Yeah.
tech. So it's more of like an avoidance there, you know? Oh, that's so fun. Like agency life after having a baby. Also, gosh, that is tricky. I went back to an agency after having our third child and ended up quitting like 2 weeks later after
Oh,
going back. Cause I'm just like, no, like I will not lose this time. It's just, and before I had left, everything was somewhat normal, but it was like something happened when I was out on leave that sort of like, I don't know, accelerated what their needs or something, right? And so it was just very demanding and really hard. And I think agency life is really hard to begin with. Like it's
it is. It
really
is.
demanding, I think anyway.
And I think it's interesting too because I don't know if this is true anymore, but like in our era of like entering the job force, I think that agencies were very commonly where people would start. And remote work,
Yeah,
like
I agree.
wasn't really that much of a thing yet.
Mhm.
So people would go to local
Mhm.
agencies in their city, and once in a while I miss agency life just because you get to work on so many different things,
Mhm.
like clients with completely different
I
needs.
agree with that.
And like I, built an app for Montessori schools, and then I built like an app for ordering pizza, and then we did stuff with Biore, and so I was doing like stuff about like facial beauty products and stuff like that. And it's just like such a
Yeah,
variety of different things that you get to do, and I do kind of miss that. Like once you go into product development, that pretty much disappears. Like that amount of variety goes away. But yeah, like
I
these
agree.
days, are people like just walking into like remote roles in product development? Like I don't even know how things have changed for people who are entering the industry now.
I don't know. I feel like it kind of depends on like maybe your educational path cuz like what I'm just trying to kind of think back to some of the like the junior devs and folks I've chatted with, and I feel like if you take the traditional path of like the computer science or like the software degree, it feels like the natural is to like go into that internship at a big enterprise
Yeah.
company. And then from there, it's sort of like feel that out. And then where does that take you? And I think once you hit enterprise, I feel like you don't, I don't know, in my head, and I could be way wrong, but in my head, I'm like, once you sort of have that scope, like you don't really think about agency life.
Yeah.
And I don't think you'd even be thinking about looking at those roles, you know? But I do think that when you come from maybe a non-traditional space, I think it's easier to get a role in an agency. At least that was my experience. And I did actually, after I taught myself how to code, I did start at a product company, oddly enough, but only because it was like in my tiny, tiny town, like near Brainerd, Minnesota, just the smallest area. And there just happened to be a product company there. But then the other additional opportunities were very much agencies. So yeah, I don't know. I feel like it's a good foot in the door if you're more self-taught or like took the boot camp route maybe, but
Yeah, I
I
think
don't
you're
know.
right. I think you're
Don't know
right
for
because
sure.
like I definitely came from a non-traditional background, and I worked with a bunch of people who came from non-traditional backgrounds, like music majors and things like that.
Mhm.
And
Oh, yeah.
agencies let you learn a lot on the job, and I think like these days there's a lot of
Mhm.
companies that are like primarily only hiring senior level people. If you're looking at like corporate remote or
Right.
startups who are trying to get off the ground really quickly,
Mhm.
and the opportunities for people who are either switching careers or are just fresh out of school are not as abundant as they were. um, And yeah, it's funny though, like what you said about once you kind of transition out of agency life, you don't think about going back. Like that's totally true. Like I have not even looked at or considered working
Mhm.
at an agency ever since, even though it was really fun. But I think I was also kind of traumatized from the
Yep.
number of hours that I was working at the end there. It was like if you have a super demanding client, then it can get bad fast. So
Yeah, I agree, and I think it also takes, like I don't know about you, but I feel like it takes a certain type of personality to run an agency, and I think that sometimes those tend to be and of course, I'm stereotyping here, so, like, take this with a grain of salt, but in order to run an agency, I feel like you have to be, like, really, like, strong in sort of the hustle and, like, moving things forward because you do have to, like, sell that, and you have to be able to have all these varying projects, and so I think that also, at least this was my experience, I didn't always love the people that I worked for at
yeah.
agencies, like the owners or managers or sort of like managed. Yeah. So it was, and I get it, right? It's an agency. Everyone's moving fast. And the reason you go to an agency is you want the absolute most creative work that you can get, cutting edge, ideally, depending on the agency positioning, obviously. But yeah, I didn't necessarily love that part either.
Yeah, and occasionally they would bring in people, like, if we're working really closely with the client and they had, like, PMs or something, like, they would bring in somebody from the client,
Mm-hmm.
and oftentimes those people were quite intolerable, honestly. I remember there was one guy that
Mm-hmm.
we were working with on the nightmare project that was, like, the 100-hour-a-week project, and he worked for the client, and he would come to meetings with the engineers, and he would say, why can't you do this faster? It's not rocket
Oof.
science. He just loved the words like it's not rocket science. And we're all like,
Oh
dude,
my
can you do
gosh.
this? Because
How
please don't
toxic.
tell us it's
Yeah,
not
no
rocket
kidding.
science. Like it was just so patronizing. But yeah.
See, that's what I'm talking about. Like, I wanted to sugarcoat it, but at the end of the day, like, that's exactly what I'm talking about. There's like toxic people that bring in sort of egos and pressure, right? Honestly, like that person probably didn't want to be malicious, hopefully, but at the same time, I'm sure they had pressure, right? And so then it all comes out. And I feel like agency life is just more stressful, even though startups can, of course, be stressful too. But there's just this level of stress there that you
Yeah.
really have to like be calm and cool as a cucumber and to deal with, you
Yeah,
know?
and that is an interesting thing too. Like I hadn't really thought about the stress levels a whole lot. Like mostly I was like fixated on the number of hours. But if I think about all the startups I've
Yeah.
worked for and the level of stress that I've experienced at the startups versus the level of stress that I experienced at the agency over those like 4.5 years I was there, it's way higher in the agency world. And just like more of a
Mhm.
roller coaster because the clients are all very different from each other.
Yes.
But again, like there are
I
definitely
totally
things about
agree.
it that I miss. So, but I probably wouldn't
I
try to
agree.
go
You know what I
back.
really miss?
And I think the other
I
thing
know,
is like
right? I think
pay,
yeah, go ahead.
right? Like agencies, in order to make more money, I had to go to like a remote company that had a product.
Mhm.
Um, the agency just like
Yep. I agree.
they don't pay as much.
Fully agree with that. I definitely agree with that. I think what I did really like about agency life, I don't know about you, but it was nice that like at least in the agencies that I were in, they were traditionally like content management shops, right? So like building out custom WordPress, custom Joomla, custom Drupal, custom whatever CMS we were using. But what I really liked about it is like it was like truly full stack, even though I was like in the most cases like usually lead front end dev or front end dev or whatever. But I was still doing like server stuff. I was still doing like domain things. Like I was still doing a lot of the other things that play into building websites or building those solutions. And so I didn't just know front end programming. Like I started learning about all the things. Like I used to be super skilled at like Linux servers and bringing all that stuff together. Now those skills have died off, especially since the
Yeah.
cloud. But I think that was the nice thing about like agency life was like being able to really get your hands into a lot of different things. And like you said, different types of projects. And I think all the different technical pieces that went into those projects as well, which was
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah. No, totally. Like, I'm very grateful for my agency experience because that is what enabled me to be full stack. And even though like
Mm-hmm.
you, like I
Exactly.
was leading like front end stuff, but I also, had a seat at the table with the API architecture and things like that. So, and
Exactly.
then, once in a while you'd be like the only person working on a project and then you have to do the entire stack. which is also super
Yes, which
fun.
is
Like,
beautiful
for
but
good
painful.
clients, like, that is super fun to do. But, yeah, it's definitely something that,
Mhm.
like, in product development, you kind of have an area and, like, you stay in your lane. Um, and a lot of people do a lot of
Yep.
hobby projects
Yeah.
because of that, in order to develop those other skills, but at an agency, you really can do everything. So
Mhm. Yeah, I agree. It's making me miss agencies, but then I'm also sort of like, "Oh, but
yeah,
remembering all the stress and all of the campaigns too,"
yeah,
you
and
know?
also just, like,
Oh, that's
commuting to
interesting.
work. That's a thing that I don't
Mm.
honestly think I'll ever do again. Um, so
I will never do it again, and I mean, I shouldn't say never because you just don't know, life can
yeah, yeah,
change and things can change, and I'll tell you right now, thing definitely in a flux right now myself, and so is, like, the rest of the world, but I would hope not to, but I will say the nice thing about agency life, at least when I was in an agency, is I was in like Northeast Minneapolis. And so for anyone who doesn't know Minneapolis, it has kind of these beautiful little areas. And so Northeast was just kind of like this kind of up and coming area. And so there was a brewery like literally in the same building as where the agency was. And so it's super nice. Like I don't really drink, but like at a brewery, there's a lot of like social
yeah,
goodness, at least in the Minneapolis one. And so like, people are playing bean bags and like there'd be bands and you could go get food. And so it was just really nice to like be like, okay, it's lunchtime. I like have to step away from this code for a little bit. I'm going to go hang at the brewery, get some food, chat with some people, get a little social goodness, and then come back and like feel re-energized. At least for me, because I'm an extrovert. But I loved that. And so sometimes I
yes,
think agency life does come with like a little bit of depending location and where you're at in the city, and there can be some fun additives to that. But once you have kids, agency life is kind of like
yeah. And yeah, that's probably one of the things that I miss a lot just about culture was the fact that like at lunchtime we would go into the city and look for places to eat. And
mm-hmm.
be able
Yeah.
to actually like physically remove ourselves from whatever we were doing and have some social
Mm-hmm.
time, and like be able to make friends who actually live in the area. Like that has been very difficult ever since I
Yes.
started working remote, because I'll make friends but they don't live
Tell
anywhere
me
near
about it.
me, so it becomes a thing where like, oh,
Mm.
I see my friends like at conferences and that's basically it. um, so
Yep. Same here. Or on video calls or podcasts
true,
like
yeah, this
this.
is this is true, but we don't get to like hang out that much, which
Mhm. I agree. Are you still in Michigan? Remind
yeah,
me.
I am.
I don't remember where you're
I live
located.
out in the
Okay.
sticks though
Um,
now, so once I started
love
working remote,
that.
we were able to like, live
I
away from the city, so that was nice.
Yeah, for sure. I used to be in Minnesota, and so that was like we just moved to Texas like 4 years ago. So I've mostly been Minnesota, sort of born and raised. And I remember like there's a couple times I went to like Michigan for different events too, and I always loved it because it just like very much had the same vibe. I think there's just something about like the
Yeah,
Midwest, and I don't know what it is, but it's a cool place to be generally. So
yeah, yeah, and it's funny, like,
yeah.
as an adult, I appreciate that. As a kid, like, I was like, "I'm getting the hell out of here as soon as I can," which I never actually did,
Same.
and I didn't end up doing that, and and I don't regret it because
Isn't that
especially because, like,
funny?
going into DevRel and, like, you get to travel a lot, so I don't feel like I'm missing out
Yep,
on other things, so and it's nice to have, like, your parents really close
I
by and
agree.
stuff like that. But speaking of,
That is
like
nice. It's actually funny. Oh, sorry.
oh, I was gonna change
No,
the
jump in, jump
subject.
in.
So if we but I was gonna say speaking of, like, working remote and kind of the employment situation, like, currently in tech overall, I have been seeing a lot more companies who are still hiring remote, but you do have to live in a certain city, especially with DevRel.
Mhm. Not a
Yeah,
fan.
so I've seen a lot of
I know, and I don't get it.
yeah, the pop I guess it maybe, like, they wanna build local community? Like, that's if
Mm,
you're still able to work fully remote,
I get
but
that,
you need to
but
be in a certain city, then, it must be that, like, access to, like, immediate, close, cheap access to everything in the city, like San Francisco and New York City. Um,
that part I get. Those cities I understand, right? Like, I know especially, like, San Francisco right now, even though it still frustrates me because at the end of the day, DevRel does have to do so many different things and, like, do have to travel, and so to make them on the West Coast when they have to travel to the East Coast, it's like it just makes 0 sense to me, like, find someone who's in the middle, and it's a better experience for everybody from cost and from, like, actually like jet lag and being daunting to travel. But like San Francisco, I kind of understand, especially if you're like an AI company, because I will say there's some serious FOMO around some of the developer events that are happening with AI. Because it's like daily or like multiple times a day where there's like events that you could go to that's related to AI or like lateral to AI. And so I do understand that a bit. And obviously, you know, like New York City, there's some of similar sentiments there as well. But I don't know. I think at the end of the day, like the nice thing about DevRel or like, I mean, love to hear what you think, but like you don't have to be there to build community, right? Like there's a multitude of different ways. And honestly, the best way to build DevRel is actually to enable your super fans, your developers that love your product to actually build that community for you, right? Like starting to build a meetup network or starting to build a network and like bringing developers who are in San Francisco and saying, hey, here's all the tools, like help us help you bring a community together, bring those developers together. And then they feel more empowered to like, hey, I built this community, I help contribute to this community. And then on top of it, once you start doing that, right, then you can hit the whole nationwide, then you hit the whole global. And so it's like, why put someone in one space and pigeonhole them to that area when like there's so much opportunity and really the opportunity to like empower your developers, which is like at the end of the day, the way that you're going to get the most traction is by having your actual users. Like, I don't know about you, but I will say like since starting my business about a year and a half ago, I sort of shifted away and I wouldn't say I even do that much with DevRel. I actually do a lot with insights now. What you were talking about with like understanding, do I want to click login or do I want to click identity? And I absolutely love it. And I think in that vein, it's been interesting to see that a lot of the developers I'm talking to actually steer away from DevRel now because I think that they've seen sort of you and I have talked about it, right? The sort of like marketing DevRel that isn't what developers are still looking for. And so I've heard most recently that they're really trying to shy away from, I don't want to talk to the developer advocate. I don't want to talk to someone who's in DevRel. Like I want to talk to an engineer because they have seen this shift and they've seen that it has turned into essentially just developer marketing.
Yeah.
Curious what you think or if you've heard anything similar.
Yeah. That's how I think it depends on the company, but that is how it's starting to
For
feel.
sure.
Like I remember when
Yeah.
earlier on when I was going into DevRel, there were all these debates about where DevRel belongs in an organization. And I think like they're still ongoing, but more and more DevRel is in marketing. And when I started DevRel, we were in
Yeah.
marketing.
Unfortunately.
It actually worked really well though,
Mhm.
because marketing is where the money is. So you have all of these like additional
I agree with that.
but like
Yeah.
it depends. It
Sorry.
depends on the company's understanding of DevRel and what they want from DevRel. Like, do they
Mhm.
want
Mhm.
developer
Yep.
marketing, or do they want developer relations? And sometimes you just have to be
Yep.
there for long enough to figure out, or you have to be there for long enough to gain trust and then establish this is what DevRel is, and this is the value that we bring, and it's not equivalent to marketing, and here's how we're different. And yeah, like
Yep.
it's I've done to be honest, I've done DevRel both in product and in marketing, and I actually have developed a preference for doing it in the marketing orgs, just because there was for
Ooh.
at least for like the roles that I've had, it's been easier to like do the
Mhm.
external outreach from marketing because they have like all of that set up and like that's
Sure, I could
part
see that.
of the motion. So
Yep.
in product, it always felt kind of more insular. So we would gather up
Mm.
feedback and like bring it back in and then like test SDKs and things like that. But there was less community stuff and also less
Yeah.
like interaction with like being able to go out and build community versus interacting with the community that already exists. So it it's
Yep.
been kind of interesting. Like I think it can be successful anywhere in a company. Honestly, like you could put it in support. Like it could be successful anywhere
Agreed.
because DevRel is so incredibly
Yep.
cross-functional. Like we can work with and facilitate and support almost any other department at an entire company. So I think
Yep.
people want it to be its own thing, like reporting to like the CEO or like the CTO or something. And I would love that, but I've never been able to work at a company where that was true. So it just is one of those
Yeah.
things. It's like, yes, that would be awesome. And at a very small number of companies, they do that and it's possible, but usually it's not possible. Like the company just won't do that. So it's been interesting, like kind of moving around in the companies, and like many companies move DevRel from department to department because like they're not sure where it goes.
Mm-hmm.
So like right now, at
Yep.
FusionAuth, DevRel used to be under engineering, and now it's under marketing.
Ooh, love it.
So it's
Mm.
it's like, what are you trying to do, and like where do
Yes.
you give DevRel enough autonomy to kind of be their own thing, even if they are reporting into a department? And I think like that can be done even if you are in a specific department. It doesn't need to be that you're reporting directly to the CEO or something. But if you're,
Yep.
a team in a department that operates, with some level of autonomy from the other teams in that department, and like works with them, but maybe doesn't share the same metrics, or has a slightly different like customer profile that they would be talking to, um, then it can totally work. It just, I think DevRel needs to have the trust of the company, and sometimes it takes some time to build
Yep.
that up. Like sometimes you have to come in and it is a certain
Yep.
way, and you have to prove strategically and tactically that this is how DevRel works, and it is successful this way. And we're not just like
Mm-hmm.
another group of people who work in marketing. So I think,
Yes. Oh, I fully agree. Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to cut
no,
you
no,
off.
I was done.
I fully agree. Like, it's actually been interesting. I feel like I've had the opportunity to almost report to potentially every maybe sector of the business. And interesting enough, like I am honestly shocked by this, but when I was at Snap most recently, I reported to partnerships, which like partnerships in that sort of vein is like also sales
Yeah.
ish because we were our own little like sector on the B2B side and really kind of operated a lot like a startup inside of a big enterprise company. And at first I was like, whoa, this is really different. I don't know how I feel about this, but like had lots of different conversations before even like entertaining the opportunity. And after getting in, like, I don't know, like if they do partnerships that way, man, that was the absolute best team and best operational efforts that I've been a part of. And why was because in that vein, they weren't necessarily chasing down revenue, which I think obviously is a huge differentiator. They were really chasing down like carving out an ecosystem for augmented reality. And I think when you look at it in that vein, it's like you need to bring in developers and agencies, which is actually where I worked most was with developers and creative agencies and AR, was to start to carve out those use cases because folks didn't understand what they could do with AR yet. It's obviously something new and we know the other A acronym won out. So we'll see AR one day. But in that ecosystem, it was about like enabling developers to be creative. And I just loved that so much, where it was like, I didn't have the revenue metrics as much as that killed me. Because for me, revenue influenced is like my North Star for DevRel, because there's just so much clutter, so much going on. And in order to really prove the value of it while trying to get the trust that you were talking about, there has to be sort of this influence on the company because it is a big cost center if you are doing a lot of
Yes.
that external travel and a lot of marketing type of outreach. So I totally agree on the budget side. But the nice thing at Snap was like being under partnerships, that team was like, because you're partnerships, right? It's a super important team. It's essentially sales. Like they lead sort of that force of bringing the users in that way, right? And so I had amazing autonomy and amazing connections with like everyone. And so we had a developer marketing org that I worked with, and it was like if we were doing something marketing related, it tapped into their budget, but came back to DevRel, which was under partnerships. But then I was also not like very tightly knit with product because we were building a product that was still in beta and starting to advance to that general access. And so it was a lot of, okay, what do the developers think? What do they want to build? What restrictions should we take off? What restrictions should we add? What are we learning? And it was just this really beautiful sort of trifecta between marketing, product, and then partnerships. And it's strange, honestly. Like I was in an enterprise company and had truly the best DevRel experience I've ever had. Oh man, it makes me miss it so much. I'm like, Snap team, I miss y'all. It was super fun. But at the end of the day, right, it's like it really does depend on like what your company is going after. I actually just like tweeted and posted this on LinkedIn this morning that it was like someone was asking like where should DevRel exist, and I'm like, DevRel is intended to help developers find success with your product. So if finding success with your product means that you're on the forefront of marketing and that's where you have to be so that you're outward, you're at the events, you're in the community, you're public facing because that's how they need help, amazing. amazing. If they're coming into that funnel, right, and they're doing a great job bringing them in, and it's more about that, like, let me handhold you through using this SDK. Let me train you on some of these more complicated parts of our product, which was one of my first DevRel roles, was very much on product enablement. Then it's different, right? And so I fully agree that it is can be anywhere, but I think what's really painful is when you end up under marketing, the leader doesn't get it. The leader keeps fighting and wants to push you for creating leads, and it's like, yes, DevRel creates the leads, but it's like only when and if we are able to get developers to see the value in the product and enable them to find success with that product, does that actually turn into something lucrative for marketing. And so I think for me, it was just painful in those types of roles, because it's like, I'm not going to like contribute to your marketing metrics at the way that you think that it should be contributed. Like, it's going to happen, but it's going to be weeks or months or maybe even years later based on what you're looking for your type of funnel metrics, you know?
Yeah, the long tail, it's just such a long tail effort. And like a lot of times it will pay off in a huge way,
Exactly.
but it's pretty hard to like tie stuff that happens, 9 months later to stuff that happened initially to kick
Exactly.
off that relationship. And like I know that in general, just like DevRel attribution is still a challenge, and a lot of it is just kind of like
Mhm.
estimating, like if we reach X number of people, then that translates into probably this many like people who will stick around and actually go to the website, like things like that, because you don't really know. Like you can set up some attribution tracking,
Exactly.
but the ecosystem is so
Yep.
complex. And like when a developer does start engaging with a company, they're going to have many touch points like throughout that cycle. Like, if
Mhm.
we're counting, how many
Exactly.
people, like, attended a talk or something, well, maybe one person attended the talk, and then if
Yep.
we're also counting how many people, like, downloaded the product or downloaded a sample or something, the same person who went to the talk can
Yep.
download the sample, and then they go on to do something else, and maybe eventually they become, like, an ambassador, like a champion. And being able to, like,
Yes.
track their journey is very difficult beyond just like talking to them. And yeah, I think
Yep.
like people who are looking for the value, like metrics and stuff, like need to understand that. And yeah, it's just
Yes.
a really hard thing to be like, here's a nice spreadsheet of everything that happened, because that's not really. It's a winding path. Um,
I agree. It's interesting too that you say that, because so in after a couple different roles, I started realizing that, right? That the path to actually getting to understanding that, because like eventually I was like, okay, revenue influenced has to be the thing. And I know that everyone's like, DevRel isn't sales, DevRel isn't sales. Of course it's not sales, right? But you have to understand that sort of path, and like, did they lead to a level of revenue? Because when you can report revenue influence from your DevRel team, that impresses executives far more than like, well, I had 100 devs come to my
yeah.
talk. They're like, so what? What does that even mean, right? And so in a lot of like my most recent roles, probably like the last 3 to 4, I was fighting to get a CRM, like a custom CRM that was tracking, does somebody sign up, even with their fake Gmail or whatever Gmail, because that's what developers use,
Hmm.
to actually go from that path to getting into the docs, to downloading an SDK, to attending an event. And so I'm like, if we had a full built out CRM that is tracking these different touch points, we're finding the different avenues to go collect all that data and have a full picture. Then when someone does come in and they're like, oh, hey, so and so was a part of a sales deal, and they're like, oh, guess what? They met Tessa at this
Yeah.
conference first. Then they came in with their Gmail account. Then they came in and downloaded an SDK. Like, they actually was all attributed back to those first conversations of DevRel. And like, leaders didn't understand why I cared so much about a CRM. They're like, you're DevRel. Why do you care about a CRM? I was like, because it's the
That's a
path.
journey.
It's the way to
Yeah.
like influence and see exactly, to see like, how did they actually get here to begin with?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. DevRel's like been in an interesting place, I think, over just like the last year. It's been kind of, I
Mm-hmm.
don't feel positively about what's happening, because there are now
Me neither.
like jobs being posted again. Like I see quite a few postings for DevRel jobs,
Mm-hmm.
but there are far more people
In
who have been
office.
laid off. And yeah, like the people
Uh-huh.
who have lost their jobs are having an incredibly hard time getting hired. And like these are amazing people. Like just amazing people. And I'm like, so there's like these jobs that exist and there's these amazing people and like, why isn't this just matching up? And yeah, and then there was like that,
I really
oh, sorry. Then there was that shift of like,
go ahead. So I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
then there was a shift of like, we want AI DevRel, and like a lot of it was like, but you have to have
Mm-hmm.
this many years of experience already doing like AI, and people are like, well, I was just doing DevRel for something else. I can learn, but they're like, no, you have to have this much experience in it already, and you have to live in the city.
Right.
Like,
And then you
how
have
it goes.
exactly. You have to live in the city, and then you like obviously don't have DevRel experience, right? So then you have people who are coming into DevRel who haven't done DevRel before, trying to figure out DevRel, navigating sort of the space all over again. That I feel like was like more happening back like 8 or 10 years ago, right, when DevRel started to like really come out and flourish. And it might even been less time than that, honestly. But I fully agree with you. It's interesting. It's actually the reason I pivoted my business. Like I started wanting to really be like, you know what, the, humbly, I think that I'm quite good at my job. I feel like I understand it. I've been able to drive great success at the last few companies I've been at. And so I'm like, okay, I know that if I go start a business, I can impact more products. I can actually drive DevRel forward and start to create additional. I don't know. I guess like my hope was like folks could see DevRel in a better light, right? I had this very optimistic hope that one single person could try to show that DevRel isn't just marketing, right? And so that's my intent. And I started going through that, and it was just constant pain. And I mean, I just pivoted my business like in April to shift over to developer insights, to understand what developers actually think, to know why they're dropping off from your product. Where are those friction points? Why do they not even come into your lead funnel, but the traffic is there, right? All shaped on insights because like I honestly like I've a really curmudgeon attitude about DevRel now. Like there is sort of this the premise of like we just want leads, we want results, right? And they didn't want to actually invest. But then on top of it, didn't necessarily also want to listen to the people that they brought in to do DevRel to begin with. And that was such a common thing that I heard from a lot of folks in DevRel. And so as I was learning through my business, like I started realizing that like actually marketing the terms DevRel got me zero results. I had to change all of my messaging because a lot of folks didn't, in at least the founders and things that were coming into my space were like, wait, what's DevRel? What is developer relations? When at the end of the day, what they wanted was like they wanted developer users. And so they didn't really understand all the terms. And so between sort of like, whoa, there's a lot of people that don't know DevRel, but then whoa, there's a lot of people that have these misconceptions around DevRel. I was just like, okay, just really frustrated with it. And like, I'm out, like I'm done with DevRel. And then, you know, I would say it was like January or February-ish, I think. I started getting to the point where I was like, okay, I'm not getting the clients. I'm not making the money I need. Like this isn't working. And I started to actually apply for jobs in DevRel. And honestly, like, again, I say this truly with like humble, like, I feel like I've worked hard to kind of build the reputation that I have. Like I don't even want to say this because it sounds bad, but I haven't been rejected from DevRel opportunities before. Like
Yeah.
until this year. Like I had applied to, but only because I applied to opportunities that I know I'm invested in. I know that I'm qualified for. I know that I'm going to love doing. And so it usually works out. And so I got rejected. Like I made it to the CEO interview and totally botched it. Just did a horrible job on my own, right? Didn't get that job, and then applied for a few sort of like similarly, but also lateral roles like developer product marketing, that type of thing, and got nothing but rejections. And so it was just like, whoa, like it's an interesting space. And I think the companies are looking for maybe not normal DevRel people because maybe
Yeah.
they've seen sort of like the DevRel catastrophic failures, right? And maybe they want someone who understands people and understands the users, like you were saying, already has the AI experience, and they're looking more for that.
Yeah.
So I don't know, but it's a very interesting climate right now.
Yeah. I had a suspicion because I've gone through that too, where I, you know, made it like all the way to the CEO and then like had a great conversation, and then it's like, oh, sorry, like we decided to, you know, not proceed with you, and I'm like, okay, like,
Hmm.
well, at one point I think I had somebody who, like the recruiter at the company was like, they love you, like it's going really, really well, and then like a few days later I get a rejection, so I'm like, okay. But it I
So weird.
there's been some positions, I'm sure you've seen them, like on LinkedIn, that open up for like a head of DevRel or something, and then they're open for a while, and you can see the number
Mhm.
of people who've applied, and maybe it's like in the hundreds, and then the
Yep.
position stays open. You apply, you have friends who apply, everybody gets rejected, and then they reopen the position again and like repost it. And like my suspicion is that
You're like, "What are you
they're
looking for?"
looking for exactly one specific person who has exactly the specific skills that they want, and they
Yeah.
reject everybody else. And they're not willing to be
Yeah.
flexible on that. Like, they're not willing to let people learn on the job, or they're not willing to just let a slightly different point of view come in. And so they just reject like
Yeah.
hundreds of people. And right now, like, I've seen the people who are unemployed, like, they should be getting those jobs.
It's good people.
Absolutely, they should be getting those jobs. And
Mhm. I agree.
and the fact that like it became like a joke. Like, I think there was like a thread where people, were talking about one of these postings, and they were all like, "Oh yeah, like I applied for that," and it was like, "I applied for it too." Like, just down the list, like everybody applied and got rejected, like all these senior people, and they're like, I wonder what they're looking for. Like, what are they specifically looking for these roles that just keep getting posted over and over? But
Yeah.
there was
I think you're right though,
someone.
'cause I will say, like, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean
Oh,
to
no,
cut
I
you
I
off.
said
I think there's a lag.
yeah, I think there's a little bit of a delay. But go
I think for the role that I was in, I totally botched the interview, which is not normally like me. I'm usually like I show up, I'm, just myself, and I'm usually okay with that and can do a fine job. But I totally botched the interview. So it was like one of those things of like it wasn't meant to be. But I will say like some of the feedback that did come back, because the team did really enjoy having conversations with me, was that they were looking for someone who had very detailed experience in what they were doing, which I had some, but not the level of like understanding that they were looking for. And so you're probably right with that, at least, or at least that was my experience in that case, is like they really wanted someone who was like deeply tied into that actual ecosystem, which I wasn't as much as. Actually, they did end up hiring somebody for the person who's in that role now. It was a great fit, so I get it, but it's just been interesting for some of them, like you're saying, it's really qualified people who are really great at the job. And I kind of am curious, like what's going to happen on the other end, like finding that super niche specialized person that maybe doesn't have the DevRel experience but has that product level or ecosystem experience, like if they're panning out. And maybe that's a better angle, I don't know, but I will say DevRel has sort of been this like ebb and flow. And I think the DevRel that we saw during COVID with like all the massive hirings and just like get it out there, get in front of people, and the very what I call marketing DevRel kind of hype also didn't work, right? And so I think maybe there's this, we're all just trying to figure it out, whether it be the company or the DevRel people, and like, what do we do next? But I think what breaks my heart the most is folks who are in DevRel, and like, I actually had a little rant about this over the weekend. The folks who are in DevRel that you're talking about, right? Those really experienced people, we've lost a lot of our technical skills unless we've been given that opportunity to stay close to engineering or stay close to product, where I wasn't. I got pulled into the business side, I got pulled into the strategic side, which I love doing. And in hindsight, I regret losing all of those technical skills that I had. Like, I have not kept them sharp. And so now if I'm like, oh, let's just get back into engineering, oh man, I don't even know that I
Yeah.
could interview and actually pass the engineering tests and everything that they would do now. And so it's heartbreaking, because like I was just talking to someone that you and I are probably both friends with, that, he's still looking for a role. And I was like, hey, can you shift back to engineering? And he's like, I don't think I can. He's like, I don't have those technical chops. And I'm like, yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat. And so I don't know, it's heartbreaking. And I'm hopeful that there's going to be some forward movement. But I also think economically, and what we're seeing sort of in our country in the US anyway, is like I don't see a lot of hope. So I don't know,
Yeah.
it's a very weird space right now for sure.
Yeah, and I agree about, like, the technical thing. The technical thing too is, like, you lose more of those hands-on engineering skills as you go up the chain. So people who have had
Exactly.
roles of,
Yep.
like, head of or VP of or whatnot are probably a
Mhm.
little farther removed from some of those things that, like, the advocates are doing every day. And so it's
Exactly.
it's just been like, I considered also, like, could I get a job as an engineer? Like, if I wanted to go be an IC engineer again, like, could I do that? And I was like, I don't think I'm hireable as that, which is depressing, on many
Same.
levels, because I was like a pretty great engineer, like I like to think. But yeah, I think the
Same.
other thing that happened in that explosion when people were hiring like gangbusters for DevRel is the salaries got really inflated. And so now
I agree with that.
everybody is looking for a certain salary because it's what they've been paid for the last 4 years. And those salaries are just not
Mhm.
there anymore. Like some of the AI startups are still offering like salaries that look like that, but by and large, like companies can't afford to be spending that kind of money on like people who aren't like VPs or senior directors. So
Mhm.
it's just been hard on that front too. Like nobody wants to take a pay cut, obviously. I
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's hard.
Yeah, yeah, and, like, I took a very substantial have taken a very substantial pay cut, like, in my career, and, like, you make it work, but also it feels like you're being devalued when you had a really high salary,
I
and it's not
agree.
true. Like, it might totally not be true, it's just how the economy is right now, and just the situation with hiring and with the applicant pool and all of these things, all of these factors, like, it's not like people are like, "Oh, well, they don't deserve as much money anymore." Like, they used to be more valuable,
Mhm.
but now they're like, that's not the case, it's just the economy. But,
Yeah,
like, it's just really painful to go through as an employee. So
I
that
agree.
that has been, I think, making this again more complicated and more frustrating for people, because yeah, some of those salaries were like ridiculously high, and people got used to that. So
Yeah. I fully agree with that. Yeah. And it's hard too. And like, of course, it's going to happen. Like, economically, things are going to change and we have to sort of ebb and flow. But I fully agree with you. I think there's something that, resonates with you as a person. And I think on top of it, like DevRel's not an easy job to do. There's so much context switching. And if you are someone who's traditional sort of engineer or technical, context switching is like our least favorite thing to do. Like we want to jam out on something and get it knocked out, solve a problem, and move on to the next thing. And like, so DevRel's not easy. And so I think some of those, what definitely were inflated salaries, they got a little out of hand, honestly. They also felt good, right? Because it was like, oh my gosh, I finally feel like I'm being paid for all of the chaos that is
yes,
in my job, all the hats that I wear, all the draining, exhausting things that I do. And so now it's like, wait a minute, I still have to do all those draining, exhausting things, but now I'm paid less.
yeah,
And so it is,
yeah,
and it's not that it's, again, like you said, you're not devalued, right? But it's just sort of like, oh, it just gives you this negative feeling, and then you're going into those either new roles or other opportunities and just sort of already feeling down.
yeah,
It's hard. It's really hard right now.
yeah, yeah. It's super hard.
What a yeah. What a fun conversation this has been. We went like way long, but that's totally
Oh
okay. Like
yeah.
I let them just naturally go where they go. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Honestly, like I just, as long as you don't have anything in your calendar that you have to bounce for. But
I don't think I do. Actually,
yeah,
maybe
this
I
was
should
very
check.
therapeutic.
Let me check really quick. Uh,
Make
okay, no, I
sure.
don't.
Um
Okay, I don't.
it's just been super therapeutic to just talk about this. I'm sure there's a lot of folks in DevRel who, if they were to pick this up and listen to it, could have a little bit of like, oh, just feel it right in the feelers, right? And hopefully we can provide some therapeuticness for that. But
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, it's been lovely chatting.
yeah. Same. I mean, I always enjoy talking to you. But yeah,
Yeah, same,
thanks for having me
same,
on.
same. Of course. Well, I think we had one question in the chat, and I don't know if it was actually related. We were having such a good conversation that I didn't want to shut it down. But if we want to pop this up and see if you've got an opinion on this, what core skills and qualities should junior developers prioritize in an AI assisted development environment? And how is AI reshaping the traditional junior developer role? That's a very loaded question.
It,
I don't know if you have insights on this. I'd love to kind of hear what you think,
it's
but
very loaded, and I feel like anything I say would not be based on experiences, because
mm,
like it's been a long time since I was in a junior developer role, and the landscape has changed so much
sure.
since then. Like I think that drawing on any of my own
Agreed.
experiences would be just totally irrelevant. But I think it's basically like what I think, and take this with a grain of salt. would be if you can leverage AI effectively to get the kind of repetitive, more odious, more time-consuming tasks out of the way, and then focus on like refining the complex things yourself and really understanding those complex things. I think that that's how AI can really both help junior developers accelerate themselves, but also not take away from like people learning on their own. Um, because there's
Mhm.
so many things that like we spend a ton of time just like poring over and then trying to nitpick, and now AI can like fix all of those things, so we can get on with like the complex
Mhm.
problems that AI hasn't really caught up with yet. And I think that being able to leverage those AI tools in a way that makes you more efficient and more productive, I think is a good path to think about. Um,
I love what you said. And honestly, that was like a slam dunk answer. And I will say the same thing. I don't have the same level of experience, right? I'm self employed. So, like, I have not been inside of a company for over, right? And so, like, that's been during sort of this AI growth and acceleration. And so, I definitely don't have anything to speak to. However, thinking back to when I was a junior dev, you are so right. Like, some of those very tedious things that you get good at because you have to do it so often, and then it's just like I'm not learning anything new by continuing to doing those things, right? Then like pushing those off to AI is like so smart, because then you can start to learn the new things, because I think that's what's powerful about junior devs is like you come in with a different viewpoint. And so I've always loved having junior developers or developers from different spaces and places join teams, because they have a different viewpoint and they see things differently. They haven't been in the ecosystem, or they haven't been in a career for a long time. But then that's also the time where you have so many insights on those complex things that you don't understand. And so when you're able to, like you're saying, automate some of that stuff that's very mundane and routine that you've already got mastered, then you can invest more in those complex areas and actually have a voice and be able to speak to, hey, maybe I don't exactly know how to do this, but now I can leverage AI to help me understand how to do this, and then bring those like new viewpoints into what you're now understanding. So that was an amazing answer. I think that was a great answer, even though you felt like you were far away from it, but that was lovely.
Great, thanks. Yeah,
All
I mean,
right.
if I were starting out, that's I think what I would try to do. So
Yep. It's actually funny because like we're starting to build a product now. So I brought a co-founder in, and so we're turning Built for Devs into an actual like product, so that you can come in, get developer insights, connect with developers, get feedback on your product, have a product walkthrough, do interviews, whatever, the whole thing, right? To understand what you were saying, like at Octon,
that's
and what
amazing.
the enlightening, yeah, like the enlightening experience that you had. Absolutely. It is amazing. And I'm very excited about it. But we're starting to build it out in Laravel, and I've never touched Laravel before. Used to be a PHP dev, like we were all talking about, right? Like kind of the full stack, and that open source content management stack was like my jam. So I'm like, oh, I know PHP fundamentally, like I should be able to dive back in, but it's just been so long. And now I'm like, you know what? Why am I like letting myself feel like an imposter? Like, why not just dive into AI and have it teach me how to code? So now I'm like, maybe I'll code this weekend instead of cleaning my house.
I think it's a healthy choice to consider.
I know. I just miss it. I really miss like the like deep in code. Actually, I was talking to my 16-year-old about this. Like we were just generally talking about different things and sort of the world being a bit of a mess right now. And I was talking about how much I just miss being able to like hack on things. And like I really truly mean like hack on things, like actually try to like get myself, like push the limits. Can I break into this thing? Can I dive, and not like illegally, right? But can I push the limits of what I'm technically capable of? And I miss it. So I think it's time to code again.
Yeah, yeah,
Well,
and AI
this has
can
been
really
so
help with some of
lovely.
the like, little stuff.
Fully agree.
I
Okay, where can
actually
folks find you?
I am on X and Blue Sky, and LinkedIn is probably the strongest one, though. I'm Kim
Awesome.
Maida on LinkedIn, just no spaces or punctuation. I'm Kim Maida on X and Maida.Kim on Blue Sky. And I also have a blog
Love
at
it.
Maida.Kim. So,
Ooh,
so that,
perfect. Okay, awesome. Well, I will share those in the show notes when I convert this to a podcast. It has been lovely for anyone who is listening or watching. Kim is amazing. You should definitely follow her. Someone who I truly adore in the space. And it was just a pleasure to chat with you today. I hope you have
Yeah.
a fabulous rest of your Thursday.
Thanks so much, Tessa. And like I said earlier, it's always